Welcome to the Elements of Success podcast with Johnny Dawson. This is the show that will inspire you to uncover your formula for success so you take charge of your story, overcome life's obstacles, and find fulfillment in all branches of life. With Johnny as your guide, you will break down the science of success and experiment with how you can combine key elements to uncover discipline you need to accelerate your journey towards prosperity. Now, on to today's episode.
Welcome to the Elements of Success podcast, where we will explore traits that have helped others achieve success. Our hope is to inspire you to discover your own element of success. Today, we're joined by my co-host, Eric Johnson. Eric, how are we doing today, man?
Mr. Johnny Dawson, I'm doing fantastic. I'm so excited about today's show.
That is awesome to hear. As always, it's truly a pleasure to have your partnership and your insights and everything that we've just been doing. The show's been incredible. You've been a huge mentor to me, and I think the audience needs to know that as well as we continue our partnership of developing these shows. And I got to tell you, we had a first last night for the boys. Are you ready to hear what it was?
Heck yeah. What's going on?
So I took Maddox and Titus last night to their first ever NFL game, which was awesome.
Nice.
It was the Cowboys versus Steelers and at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, which is about 2 hours from us. So it wasn't that far of a drive from Columbus. We didn't get home till 2 a.m., which the boys thought was awesome. So that was a lot of fun. But we went to see our most recent guest, and you probably know who I'm going to say.
Oh, yeah.
Johnny Dixon. And the boys loved seeing him play, and I got to tell you, it was a great time, and I'm glad to have football back. And to our listeners that are tuning into this episode, if you haven't listened to episode 17th with Johnny, I would highly recommend that you go back and listen to it. And you get to hear how Johnny applies resilience to his life and in the NFL. And it truly is an incredible story, and he truly is an incredible person. And I'm so glad that he's getting the opportunity to do the sport and the career that he loves right now, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And did you happen to watch the game at all, Eric, last night?
I did not. I did not watch the game. I was actually out with my daughter and my wife. We joined a volleyball league. And,
oh my gosh!
Yeah, it's ridiculous, Johnny. It's ridiculous. I'm older than I remember, so that was fun to find that out when I joined this league. But I'm excited about your element for today's podcast because I've had to work on this in my own personal life.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're going to dive into today for today's element is stamina, and which is defined as the ability to sustain a prolonged physical or mental effort. And when you research the word stamina, there are a lot of other elements that we've actually talked about already on this show as elements of success. And some of those are resilience, fortitude, perseverance. All of those are key components of creating a life of stamina, in my opinion. But to me, and I think you would agree with me on this, Eric, to me, the mental aspect of stamina is far more important than the physical aspect.
100%. Absolutely.
And the reason why I believe that is there becomes a certain point that physical exhaustion just kicks in. And we've all been there at some point. You probably were there last week on the volleyball court, right?
just a little bit.
But if you create a mental fortitude that just allows you to continue that mental stamina that you've built up, and you just keep going, anything is possible. And I think sometimes we lose the ability to mentally collect our thoughts to get over obstacles that we have in our life. And it's because of that we hit a point of resistance, right? We feel like we can't go any further. And I've been there, on occasion. In fact, I have to get ready to ride in Pelotonia tomorrow. And Pelotonia, if you remember, we had a guest on, Doug Ullman, the CEO of Pelotonia. And that ride is one of the most mentally challenging events that I do each year. So, Eric, this ride is 100 miles long in one day.
Yeah, that doesn't sound, it sounds exciting. I like bike riding, but I'm more of I ride a bike to see nature and see what's going on around me, not to get someplace. Right. I mean, 100 miles, you're trying to go to a destination, my man.
Right.
And that is a long way on a bicycle. And I would probably need a much larger seat than what my bicycle has. I'll just tell you that right now, to ride 100 miles on that thing.
That is probably the worst part of honestly riding 100 miles on a bicycle, especially a cycling bike, because you might as well be just sitting on a pole or something because there is no room there. And it's the event is phenomenal. And if you're listening to this and you're in Central Ohio area, I would highly recommend check out Pelotonia as a charitable event or something that you do with a family. Obviously, you don't have to ride 100 miles, but it's all the donations go to cancer research, which is incredible, which is really needed right now too. And Doug Allman was on a previous episode, so feel free to go back and listen to Doug, and he talks about the community he's created, and Pelotonia really is a community. However, for stamina, it is more challenging mentally for me than it is physically to ride 100 miles. And here's why is about when you get about 60 miles in, you're tired, but you're not physically drained. And then you get to a part in Ohio, a little bit northeastern, where the hills start to set in. That's where you really start to get some physical exhaustion. However, the last thing you want to do when you're clipped on a bike is not make it up a hill, because that means you're falling over. And so you have this mental fortitude that's just pushing you and pushing you and pushing you. And if you can't create that mental stamina that you need, you're not getting up the hill. And that's kind of what I mean as far as when we're talking about mental stamina. What are you doing in your everyday life to create stamina, not only physically, but mentally, because that is far more important in our daily lives, and not only in our daily lives, but relationships, right? Sometimes the physical aspect of, let's say, a marriage starts to the fire starts to fail out or goes away. Well, you've got to have some mental connection there and some spiritual connection outside of just the physical aspect of a relationship. That's mental stamina. That's a relationship stamina, because eventually that could happen.
Yeah.
And if you're not keeping that in the front of your mind as you kind of move forward and navigate through life, that stamina that you're creating is wildly important, not just in physical aspects, but anything that you do in life. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I want to go back to the 100-mile ride here in a minute, but you brought up a great point with the marriage thing. I kind of joke around sometimes. I say I've been married to my wife for 25 wonderful years, but we've been married for 27. So, I mean, there's just a couple of years in there that they were tough, right? And there are times when you do go through those tough times and you have to dig deep and find something. You brought up spirituality. For some of us, it's spirituality. For some of us, it's just recentering and having to take an evaluation of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what part of it is ours, what part of it is somebody else's, what can we fix, which is not them. We can fix ourselves, right? So there's a lot of education and learning that goes into this mental fortitude that you're talking about. And it's something where I think sometimes you have to have your own little mantra, if you will, to center yourself and say, hey, look, this is something I value, right? My marriage, or I value this job, or I value this, whatever it is, I value it. I started out wanting to complete this, whatever that end looks like. And so therefore I want to stay on that path. So I'm going to go back to the 100-mile ride. You're talking about that 60-mile mark, when it starts to get hilly, when it starts to get really tough. What are you telling yourself during that time? What is going through your brain, besides pedal left, pedal right, pedal left, pedal right, that kind of stuff?
Do you know,
what's
honestly,
going on?
Yeah, what I do, and this honestly, it stems back through not only in cycling, but, and I've told a lot of people this, that riding that 100 miles is probably the hardest physical and mental obstacle or event that I've done outside of the Marine Corps. And I was a lot younger then. But I always create little things of reminders around me to keep me going, to remember why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? So
nice. Okay.
This year, I'm devoting this ride to a guy named Pastor Cujo. We called him Cujo. And he battled cancer, lost his battle to cancer, young guy. had a family, and he's the one that baptized our oldest son. And I was really close with him, not only just through a spiritual world, but a friendship as well. And so I've devoted this ride to him. But outside of that, I look at it as exercise for my own health and well-being while I'm raising funds for cancer research to hopefully save someone's life one day. Yeah. And so what I did this year was we call Titus T-Bear. And, him and I always have this running joke that he loves cold weather and he loves being cold. So I always call him like a little polar bear. Mm. Well, I went out and bought water bottles that go on my bike, and it's a polar bear on the water bottles. So anytime I look down, I just immediately think of him. And that's why I'm trying to better myself, not only physically through fitness, through my own health, but I want to live as long as humanly possible for our children. Mm. And those are little reminders that I do all around me. I put in reminders in my day. Bora, my wife, will leave little notes and things like that. And what I'll do is I'll take the note and just put it in my visor, so in my car. So when I flip the visor down, I see the note from her, and it's just a little reminder of our faithfulness to each other and our love for each other and things like that. And I think the problem is just with society in general. Once people get to a point of resistance, once they feel they can't go any further, instead of tapping into this element of stamina, or finding something like a water bottle with a polar bear on it, or no, they just quit. They forget the reminders around them of why they should keep going. And they quit because it's easier to come up with an excuse than it is to push forward just a little harder. And unfortunately, excuses always sound best to the person making them up. Mm-hmm. With stamina, you need an excuse to keep going. When you get to the point of mental exhaustion, you have to have an excuse to keep going forward. Yeah. But once you keep going and you begin to build upon your ability to push through adversities that you may face, that's when you start to tap in that element of stamina, not only physically, but mentally. Another thing that I do, and I do this every single day, is I will listen to multiple YouTube videos of motivation. Just different speeches, different topics. My favorite is a guy named Ben Lionel Scott. I just put his stuff on repeat, subscribe to his YouTube channel, and I don't even listen to music anymore when I ride or work out. I just listen to his YouTube channel the entire time. And that's what I do when I'm cycling, and I start to get to that mental exhaustion, that physical exhaustion, is I'll turn off my iTunes and start listening to his YouTube channel. And that will kick me into a whole nother gear because it's so relatable to any adversity that we may face.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest issues that we face in our life, and especially we've kind of seen this throughout time. We used to cook in ovens, right? And then all of a sudden we were able to cook in microwaves. And, I heard a term a long time ago, the microwave generation, because it was so quick. And now it's almost the instant, the Instapot generation, where things are done almost instantly. That delayed sense of gratification is something that we've lost the art of, right? And so it ties into what you're saying, because if you stop writing, if you stop, working out or whatever it is, you feel instantly better, right? Your muscles feel instantly better because you've stopped pushing them the way they are. But what you've lost is that delayed gratification of the overall goal. So you get this small little relief instantly. And I think it's so easy. And I've done it myself. I've quit something sooner than I should have, right? It was that mental piece. My body wasn't physically exhausted yet. I know I could have pushed myself further, but it was just too easy to say, man, you know what? It'd just be better if I just stopped doing this. And boy, it felt good when I did stop. One instance was yoga. I'll be honest, it was yoga. And I was getting pushed, but my body was sore, and my muscles were hurting, my shoulder was hurting. I was like, man, this is my bad shoulder. Oh, there comes the excuse. Right? That's my bad shoulder. Maybe I shouldn't do this specific maneuver. It wasn't that it was the bad part of the shoulder. It was just my muscle was sore, and I was tired, and I'm kind of whiny, but I instantly got, a result by quitting. And then later on I looked at that and I was like, man, that sucks. I quit. And I hate reinforcing that because it did feel good to quit at that moment. But later, then regret came in, right?
Yep. And regrets will always outlast in your mind than your successes, always.
Absolutely.
And I think it was Biz Stone that once said, and this is one of my favorite quotes, timing, perseverance, and 10 years of trying will eventually make you look like an overnight success.
Yes.
If you could put stamina in a quote, that's the quote, because that is a perfect example of why someone's overnight success may appear schematically from an outside appearance that they just all of a sudden made it happen, right? Mm-hmm. But in reality, it took them 10 years of just failing, trying. But if they would have quit, like your example with yoga, they would have never have reached that point of success. And people will quit more often than they will push through the mental, the physical exhaustion to try to get there. And that's a perfect quote, I think, to kind of put stamina in a perspective of just keep going until you make it. And as you know, I want to kind of conclude with this example of my coaching experience, because I love tying in success and failure. All of these elements of success, I can somehow tie it back to little kids, which is phenomenal that I think that we can do that. But so we are on to tackle football now, and I'm coaching Maddox, which is our 9-year-old. I just finished coaching Titus with baseball, so we talked a lot about that on previous episodes. So now we're in football with Maddox. And at the end of every practice, I take about 15 minutes of just raw conditioning. We're talking about everything that you would ever hate doing in football. It's a series of those events. Wind sprints, leg lifts, bear crawls, all the things that football players hate to do. We call this period the fourth quarter. So we call this drill fourth quarter. And what I do is I have the boys run 4 wind sprints. And what I want them is to get to a state of exhaustion, right? I want them to be a little winded, a little tired. Mm-hmm. Once we're there, I start asking them questions, and now it's started into this chant to where I say, is it mental or physical? And I kind of yell it out there. I don't want to do that because I don't want to make anyone wreck if they're driving or anything, go into a coach mode. But is it mental or physical? And they all repeat back now, it's mental. So what I've begun to teach them is that not only are they physically tired, but they are also mentally tired. They know it's the end of practice. They know they're about to go home. But I want them to discover that if they just dig a little bit deeper into the mental side of their stamina, they can keep going. So when we start the drills, everything is on 1. So I'll say down, set, hike, everything's on 1. By the time they are really tired, I crank it up to 2. And it's easy to make a mistake when you hear hike and then you got to wait for the second one. Mm-hmm. Mistakes were made. A lot of mistakes were made when we first started doing this. I mean, they were just mentally broken down, ready to go. Now, they rarely don't make a mistake. I could sit there and say it's on 3, 4, or 5, and they will all sit there on the line until they count. And what I had them do is I took a knee with them and I said, listen, are you guys thinking about the count in your head, or are you thinking about this being over so you can go home? And all of them said, we want it to be over so we can go home. And I said, listen, we're not here for another 10 minutes for you to think about going home. I need you to focus on why you're here right now. And they kind of looked at me, and these are 9-year-olds, and they looked at me and they're like, okay, I get that, coach. So once they started focusing on what they were doing mentally, they lost the appetite that they were physically tired. And I told them that this is stamina. They are creating stamina. If this can be applied to 9-year-olds in football, why can't you, listening to this, do this in your career, or do this in your business, or even your fitness routine, or like we talked about earlier, your relationship? Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not even your relationship with a spouse, but what about a relationship with a friend? What about a faith-based relationship? Have you reached a point in your stamina within the relationships around you to where maybe it's physically draining, or maybe you're just mentally tired and you just don't want to deal with it anymore? Or do you need to tap into that focus to where you're being intentional with what you're doing? And if you become intentional and you can figure out a way to tap into that mental stamina of your mindset just to keep going, success will happen for you, because you only fail when you quit. Mm-hmm. Eric, final thoughts.
I think that this is a beautiful, beautiful subject, beautiful topic, something that I constantly need to be reminded about, quite honestly, because again, as I've gotten older, there are certain things I'm just like, man, I'm tired, right? And it's the mental tired that gets me most of the time, and I have to put that to the side. So I love this reminder. This is something that I'm going to be going back and listening to again, Johnny, for sure.
Love it. Thank you, Eric. As always, it's awesome to be on the show with you, and your insights are always helpful, and it really helps me mentally focus on where we're going. So you play a large part in that. And to our listeners too, I think find someone that you can relate to, and it's your spouse, a friend, a colleague, a mentor, someone around in your circle, and just have a conversation around what your stamina looks like and maybe what they do to get them over obstacles or the mountains that we sometimes face.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny, again, thank you so much for the great content. And of course, our last thank you goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Elements of Success podcast with Johnny Dawson. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Johnny comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family, just like Johnny was talking about. Share this with them. Have a discussion. This is an interesting topic. We've all faced it in our lives, mental exhaustion, times we wanted to quit. You'll be surprised by what your friends and family say. Share this with them and see what they think. Again, thanks so much for listening today. For everyone at the Elements of Success, this is Eric Johnson, just asking you one more thing. Johnny doesn't just deliver great information. He has stories to go along with it. It's something that he's passionate about, but he's not the only one who has these types of stories. You do too. We'd love to hear how you have gotten through something, how you have reached deep down and found the stamina to complete something that you maybe didn't think you could complete. We'd love for you to share that story with us. Email Johnny or connect with him on many of the social media platforms, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thank you for listening to the Elements of Success podcast. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, please click the subscribe button below. If you know anyone who would benefit from listening to this podcast, click the share button.